and I am extremely excited about this. We have two weather teams coming up here, but first let's take a look at RAGHAV's accomplishments so far. Actually, it's wild to think last season they made the day 2 of Worlds without having made day 2 of a regional championships, and now RAGHAV is here in the top 4 of the regional championships and looking to continue that hot streak from last year.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how RAGHAV does. Such a good sport. It was a very strange situation at the end of NAIC last year. Really impressive run, getting all the way to second, and maybe this will be the one that RAGHAV finally gets that big victory in.
Yeah, you can see running the snow team with Alolan Ninetales and Baxcalibur. Gonna struggle up against Michael Zhang, who has been a Worlds qualifier in the last season, now hoping to get a guaranteed qualification by winning this regional championships. Will need to defeat RAGHAV and then Riley to do so. You can see we saw this team, I believe on day 1, playing up against the Dondozo team. This is that Terra Psychic Tyranitar team alongside the Como-O. That is a body press iron defense variant of the Como-O, not the Clangorous Souls boosting Como-O.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that team again. I think the previous time it was on stream, we kind of both underestimated a little bit, or we kind of counted out of a game that wound up winning. I think that's kind of just the hallmark of a good team in this format, where kind of a lot of like grindy defensive games, it seems like, and giving up at a game too early, big mistake in this format. We've seen a lot of really cool battle backs. Both these teams have some fun tools for that as well. So hopefully we get a good long 3-game set.
Yeah, I think we are going to see some really interesting interactions here. Like I mentioned, we do have the double weather Pokemon here, but the days of sun and rain are over. It is snow and sand here in Sacramento. I don't know when the last time Sacramento saw a snowstorm was, or a sandstorm, to be quite frank, as one of the agricultural capitals of the country.
It seems like we're a little too far west for the sand, yeah, but a little too far south for the snow. But yeah, I think it should be pretty fun. I think these Ninetales teams are a little underplayed. I was expecting to see more of it last weekend, and this weekend we've seen a couple of, actually I guess more than a couple, several pretty effective Ninetales teams. It's interesting, this matchup. So I think one of the things that kind of held Ninetales back last weekend was it would get out in the field and then kind of just get focused down before it actually got to use that Aurora Veil, or just get ignored entirely and kind of just do nothing for a while while all of its teammates got picked off. It's really that first scenario, but I think it's going to be tricky, this matchup. Not necessarily because it's going to get blown up, but also because there's always the threat of Tyranitar switching in. Aurora Veil is amazing from a turn efficiency standpoint because you get Light Screen and Reflect in one action instead of needing 2, like something like Grimmsnarl does. But it has to be snowing in order to use that move, and Tyranitar is slower than Ninetales, so they both enter the battlefield in the same turn, will wind up with sand instead of snow, and Tyranitar could be switching it at any time, and it makes it really tricky to actually hit that button where, just wasting an Aurora Veil really hurts, where Ninetales is not the sturdiest defensive Pokemon in the game, sort of a questionable defensive typing, so it's very high risk in this matchup.
And not even just the risk to the Aurora Veil by the Tyranitar setting the sand, but the sand also raising the special defense of the Tyranitar. This is the Assault Vest variant, and we have seen over and over again throughout the years that Tyranitar can just shrug off special attacks, and is going to have to do that here as Heatran is out on the field alongside Landorus for RAGHAV. Double rock types on Michael, so going with the full sand mode here. Sandstorm will be up on the field, boosting the special defense of both the Hisuian Arcanine and the Tyranitar. And actually, this Arcanine is such an interesting variant. We have been seeing the Choice Band. This one is a more defensive Citrus Berry that does have access to support moves like Will-O-Wisp and Howl that could be very important.
Yeah, Citrus Berry and one Pokemon Assault Vest, so a very defensive lead for Michael, even before you consider the special defense boost with Sandstorm. Landorus can immediately get out of here, maybe trying to avoid a Will-O-Wisp from that Arcanine, and we'll get to see RAGHAV's back Pokemon here. I'm kind of expecting we will not see Ninetales, but we will. Interesting. Yeah. So by sending out this way, guarantees you get to turn off the sand, and since Tyranitar is already on the field, if Ninetales is able to act on the next turn, it will be able to get the Aurora Veil off.
All right, is going to take the Will-O-Wisp for the switch in. Much better than taking something like a Rock Slide, however, as the Landorus bounces back. Got the high value Intimidate off onto both of those Pokemon. Tyranitar also getting a high value knockoff. Leftovers being dropped from Heatran is kind of a big deal. The Magma Storm will also lock Tyranitar in, still deals just a little bit of damage even after the Sandstorm has subsided. But Ninetales is now out on the field, able to set up the Aurora Veil for I think the first time we've seen on stream all weekend, even though we've seen quite a bit of Ninetales action.
Yeah.
And this Tyranitar is now trapped and has the Magma Storm.
Yeah, I mean, both those things matter, right? Where Tyranitar, so strong, especially defensively, but not gonna be able to get the boost. And we see the Moonblast coming in, just picking up that knockout instead. Who needs Aurora Veil?
Yeah, why get an Aurora Veil up when you can just get a KO? That Moonblast knocks out the Tyranitar, and Arcanine is just howling alone at the moon, boosts its own attack and takes a Magma Storm from the Heatran. So again, Arcanine is able to resist that damage, but the secondary effects of that Magma Storm, meaning that this Arcanine is trapped and is going to take residual damage over time.
Yeah, if you're wondering, this Heatran does know Earth Power. It might be a little surprising not to see it go for the super effective move, but covering well for switches here. The residual damage does make a big difference. These defensively trained Pokemon are still going to take the same percent HP damage that any other Pokemon would. And I kind of like the non-Aurora Veil there, where you kind of don't really want to let Tyranitar take that free swing. And, we still wind up a situation here where you can take the Aurora Veil this turn if you want it. Unlikely Iron Bundle is going to immediately be able to pick up a knockout onto this Ninetales. So hey, who cares?
Yeah, it's basically RAGHAV gets to pick whenever they want to have the Aurora Veil up, and the more you delay the Aurora Veil till when you need it, you actually have more turns of real high-value Aurora Veil action. Of course, holding the Light Clay means it's going to extend the duration of those screens even longer, but you could imagine, especially in a game with Assault Vest Tyranitar and the support Arcanine, that you might actually be stalling out some of those turns.
See a nice safe play here. The Icy Wind going to come in and slow this Ninetales down. It should be still in a decent spot. Heatran playing safe, not terastallizing just yet.
Heatran's playing very safe, trying to avoid all damage, especially with the threat of the Icy Wind, but calling the Protect. The Snow defense boost coming up huge there for Ninetales. Survives the Flare Blitz, not choice banded, but did have the Howl to counteract the original Intimidate. But again, that Snow boost gets the Aurora Veil up, and Ninetales hanging on to just a few hit points. RAGHAV actually may have wanted that additional 3 damage to come through on the Arcanine there.
Yeah, I think the same thing there, right? Where there's a world where that's the 9,000 ELO Ninetales play. Get the Aurora Veil up and the free switch. And Stun will faint after this turn if it stays out in the field. Heatran likely to go for the Terastallization now, but I think even with the Terastallization, having a Aurora Veil also to reduce the damage here is important. You probably want to get a little more out of Heatran in this game if you can.
Yeah, having taken a little bit of chip, that Heatran definitely needs the extra boost of both the Terastallization and the Aurora Veil to stick around even longer. RAGHAV goes ahead and uses the Terra Fairy on Heatran, a Terra that has extremely risen in the ranks as a good defensive type for the Heatran. Iron Bundle just going to protect itself this turn, knows it's not really going to get anything off here as Arcanine goes for the Rock Slide, and you can see the difference that Aurora Veil makes. Almost no damage on that Heatran after that, and is able to fire back a Heat Wave. So will just be a resisted damage onto the Hisuian Arcanine, and you can see the impact there. The Magma Storm actually doing most of the damage on that Pokemon as the Iron Bundle stays safe and Rillaboom comes in.
Yeah, you see what RAGHAV's going for there, though, right? We already know that Landorus is one of the remaining Pokemon, Rillaboom the 4th, and both of them weak against those Ice-type attacks, right? You don't want to allow Heatran and Alola Ninetales to both faint before this Iron Bundle is taken care of, because it's a very dangerous Pokemon in the endgame, especially because RAGHAV is already committed to Terastallization.
All right, and RAGHAV bringing in the Rillaboom threatens Fake Out onto either of these Pokemon. Of course, the Iron Bundle is running the Ghost Terra type, which is always scary to try and click Fake Out into that Pokemon. But no Terra, actually just a switch from the Iron Bundle, and we are seeing the Kommo-o for, I think, the first time this weekend will be Fake Out into the Arcanine. So great call there from RAGHAV, going to make sure that Arcanine is unable to do anything, and another Heat Wave coming out onto both of these Pokemon. Both easily resisting, no burns on that Kommo-o, which could be huge in the end game, but that's the end of the snow. But Aurora Veil still up, Kommo-o recovering up a lot of that damage. Basically all of that damage right back with the leftovers in the grassy terrain.
You mentioned before this Kommo-o using the Iron Defense set, one of these Pokemon are really going to struggle to do any damage to a Kommo-o, right? With the natural type advantage and then fully reliant on physical attacks. And again, the Heatran has to survive in order to deal with the Iron Bundle, so it's really dangerous to try to play too fast and loose with it, especially because it's not a great situation either. It has the Terrastalize become a Fairy type Pokemon. It's not like it has a Terra Blast.
Yeah, and even having Terrastalize into the Fairy typing, Como-O's carrying Iron Head, so threatens big super effective damage back onto the Heatran. Grassy Glide will pick up the KO on that RK9 as Como-O starts to buff up its defense. And RAGHAV recognizing that they're not going to be able to do real damage to that Como-O otherwise, especially with the leftovers and the grassy terrain recovery, gets the Magma Storm on, so traps Como-O, although I don't think Michael could not switch it anymore. More importantly is getting that big residual damage from the Magma Storm so that any damage is going to stick just a little bit better.
Yeah, Juan's in a pretty good spot here where, hey, you can't switch anymore, no longer have the threat of the Intimidate, but at least you do have these two critical Pokemon next to one another, kind of protecting one another with the threat of their damage. However, the Aurora Veil's still there, right? And Heatran has healed up quite a bit of HP. It'd be very troublesome for Michael if he was able to try to go for a knockout of the Heatran and miss it. So both sides probably going to play conservatively here. A big miss swing could be game losing.
Well, there's a Protect from Iron Bundle, a Protect from Heatran, the two biggest offensive threats for the moment. Protecting themselves, the Grassy Glide goes into that Iron Bundle's Protect. Great Protect there from Michael to avoid damage as Como-O is continuing to boost its defense. That is now +4 defense. And RAGHAV does have Landorus in the back to intimidate, which would help against the Iron Head, but that is not going to help against body press damage that uses the defense stat.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's going to be very difficult realistically for Rillaboom and Landorus to deal meaningful damage to this Como-O. So there's now a different win condition, right? Before it was like, well, you've got to knock out this Heatran of an Iron Bundle can clean up. At this point, if you knock the Heatran out, Como-O can clean up. RAGHAV's kind of pinned where he really needs both of these Pokemon down quickly.
And it's going to be the Terrastalization from the Iron Bundle. Not the Ghost to avoid Fake Out, the Ghost to avoid super effective Grassy Glide damage. Stick around for at least one extra turn. Continue to, importantly, stall out these Aurora Veil turns. Big damage coming out from that Grassy Glide, though. Definitely would have been a one-hit KO and a critical hit on the Heatran and the freeze. The Heatran is now frozen solid, not able to do anything, and that body press picks up the KO.
Freeze not mattering there, but that critical hit, ignoring the Aurora Veil, getting Heatran low enough to become an easy knockout. And now we've got two physical attackers, not only dealing with this Iron Bundle, who was able to survive because of that Terrastalization, critically there, by the way, because otherwise that attack never happens on the Heatran, but also setting up the situation where it's two physical Pokemon dealing with a Como-O at 4 levels of boosted defense.
Yeah. Landorus is out here trying their best to get this Como-O under control, but I just don't see, without the benefit of critical hits, a way for RAGHAV's two Pokemon to break through this Pokemon. It also has a really good type advantage against these two Pokemon.
You kind of have to deal with Iron Bundle first, and wisely, Michael just going for the Protect there, getting a free turn for this Como-O, and this could be, well, now.
Double free turns.
Yeah, it's free turns for everyone.
Also, crucially, with the Heatran going down, Como-O is released from the Magma Storm, so no longer having that residual damage, just going to be able to keep healing up with the leftovers and the grassy terrain for as long as it is around. Big moves there from Michael, protecting the Iron Bundle with the Terrastalization, getting the damage off onto Heatran, and stalling out these Aurora Veil turns and setting up that Como-O.
Yeah, especially given the typing here, right? One critical hit on Como-O, not going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Where you kind of need two right in a row. At least and I guess it was worse too, because now the grassy terrain fading away, which is going to make it much more difficult for Rillaboom to deal with this Iron Bundle. It was already healthy enough; it would have survived another Grassy Glide, less that crit also. It's a really good-looking situation for Michael now.
Ooh,
there's the first crit. Okay.
That's one. Iron Bundle, though, is going to remove this Landorus from the field. Said, okay, you got your crit. Enjoy that, but I need you out. Freeze Dry picks up the one-hit KO, and the Wood Hammer targeting down the Iron Bundle will pick up the KO there as well. So RAGHAV got one crit, knocked the Iron Bundle out of the game. But Como still at +4 and able to do big damage with this body press. Not quite a KO there, but still enough damage to make this Rillaboom's life very difficult. And at this point, not even a critical hit will save Raghav.
Yes, tough spot. The Aurora Veil fading there. Otherwise, Rillaboom just would have been knocked out. But yeah, I mean, it only knows grass type attacks. You see the Woodhammer coming down, but I can't imagine even a critical hit would matter. And that was not a particularly critical hit at all.
Yep, that was another one of those inflatable hammers right there, dealing basically no damage to the Kommo-o. And the Iron Defense body press Kommo-o in the late game from Michael Zhang prevented Raghav from doing much of anything. Extremely well played there to get set up that end game, even against, allowing Raghav, who did a lot of work to get that Aurora Veil up. Michael's like, okay, you got the Aurora Veil up, but I have a Pokemon here that can just sit there and wait until it's done, and I'm just gonna end it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I wound up being the Aurora Veil didn't really matter that much. I mean, I guess in part because of the critical hit, right? And in game 2, you can't assume the same thing is going to occur. But just kind of a very well-played game by Michael, where I never really exposed Kommo-o to any risk. Got the Iron defenses up pretty much for free, especially that second one is entirely uncontested. I just can't do that, right? The freeze looks a little ugly there, but body press is going to come in even resisted here, doing an awful lot of damage at +4.
Yeah, the Aurora Veil just not enough once that Kommo-o got rolling, and again, Iron Bundle able to pick up the one-hit KO on that Landorus, so no shot there. That was Raghav's last best option against the Kommo-o. The Rillaboom unable to do real damage. Have to imagine there needs to be some kind of adjustment there if, Michael has shown that I can just run the Kommo-o mode, and I don't think you really have an answer for it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. We haven't really seen a lot of the Kommo-o, even in the teams that have had it on it. And we see now what probably was happening off stream, where it is very difficult for these teams that are highly based on physical damage. If you look at Raghav's team, they really don't have a whole lot that does special damage. Ninetales primarily a support Pokemon, so it really is just that Heatran, who has a terrible type matchup against Kommo-o.
All right, well, adjustments here. Michael is removing the sand mode from the lead and going straight for that booster bundle alongside the Flutter Mane. The past and future Paradox Pokemon out on the field, staring down Heatran and Rillaboom. Again, another situation where Rillaboom has the terrain up, has the ability to fake out the Iron Bundle, but is maybe afraid of that again because of the Ghost Terra typing. But Heatran looking relatively safe here.
Yeah, I would say ish. I think the problem with the situation for the Raghav's Heatran is it just needs to do so much in this matchup, right? It needs to be the Pokemon that checks Iron Bundle. It has the best type matchup against Flutter Mane. Kommo-o is probably in the back, and he needs to deal with that too. Just stretched really thin here, right? And even though its Terastallization kind of helps against all of those Pokemon except for Flutter Mane, it's just being stretched really thin, right? You can't really expect it to stay on the field and knock out the entirety of the opposing team, but it seems like that's kind of what needs to happen here.
All right, and these are really good turns for a really good matchup for the Grassy Glide as well, which we saw Raghav hovering over. There's the Terastallization from Iron Bundle, avoiding both the super effective Grassy Glide damage and potential fake outs from the Rillaboom. Raghav is also going to match with the Fairy type on the Heatran. You cannot risk just giving up a free Hydro Pump into that Pokemon, especially if you're not able to guarantee the fake out onto Iron Bundle here.
It's still a scary spot though, right? Even if both these Pokemon just start dumping neutral damage of that Heatran slot, really hurts the wing condition. That's a ton of damage though.
That is so much damage from the Grassy Glide into Flutter Mane. Not enough to pick up the KO, but the Freeze Dry will be able to get about half of the damage, and Flutter Mane picks up the rest. So Rillaboom goes down in turn 1, but Heatran is left untouched, fires off a Heat Wave, connects with both Pokemon. That's a KO on Flutter Mane, but the Booster Bundle holding on by a thread there.
It's hard to know who really got the better of that trade without knowing all the Pokemon in the back, but I don't think I hate that if I'm Raghav. They really need all the Heatran to do a lot of work in this matchup, and the way that played out, Heatran takes no damage, picks up a knockout, nearly knocks out another Pokemon. I'd say you take it. I mean, especially with Flutter Mane knocked out, you need to be Terastallized anyway, so it's not like you overcommitted on your Terastallization. I think it's about as well as that turn 1 could have gone.
Absolutely, and the Tyranitar switching in for Michael. We saw Raghav does still have the Alolan Ninetales in the back, which means Raghav can guarantee that Snow goes up after this turn by either U-turning out into the Ninetales or switching, instead just opting for damage, but Iron Bundle with the Hydro Pump lands it on the Landorus. Big damage, that's a one-hit KO. Doesn't need the Freeze Dry, got the hit on the Hydro Pump, and a critical hit Rock Slide connects with Heatran. No flinch though, so this Heat Wave will connect with the Iron Bundle, a little bit of damage onto that Tyranitar. We see the power of the Assault Vest in Sand there, as well as the resistance as Tyranitar shrugs off that Heat Wave, and Heatran taking the Sand damage to negate the Grassy Terrain recovery.
Yeah, I mean, that's really rough. I mean, this Heatran, again, it's so important. It will heal up a little bit because this game, it does still have its leftovers, at least for now. But Landorus not being able to do any real damage to the Tyranitar, that makes it a very difficult Pokemon to take out, right? It may be able to handle these Pokemon on its own. Como is coming out here, and you wind up in a situation where you really want to target both of these Pokemon. The one very great thing for RAGHAV here is that Ninetales now actually has a pretty good type matchup.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not going to be able to do anything to get away from that weakness to rock type attacks, but Como really doesn't want to face down a fairy type Pokemon like this Ninetales, and you know, there's not any way for it to terrestrialize either because Iron Bundle's already used it.
Yeah, RAGHAV has preserved the Ninetales for this end game. Last time, Como was able to just sort of get those iron defenses up against a bunch of physical Pokemon and Pokemon that could not really deal super effective damage. Ninetales is now able to do 4 times super effective damage into the Como with the Moonblast. So will be a game of protects and targeting. No protects, Ninetales just fires off the Moonblast, and that's a one-hit KO. Como that was able to control the game in game 1 is knocked out immediately by this Ninetales. Aurora Veil, not a priority, the damage is. Rock Slide connects onto Ninetales, and the Snow Boost going so crazy here for this Pokemon. That is at least a 3-hit KO, maybe 4 after Grassy Terrain recovery.
Yeah, especially because I think now the Aurora Veil will be coming up. Really see the difference between Hail and Snow. Ninetales getting a little bit better in the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games where, you know, Snow, unlike Hail, increases the defense of Ice-type Pokemon. Gonna go for the Icy Wind instead. This is a very speedy Tyranitar, so perhaps allowing Heatran to move before it on this turn.
Yeah, this is the same Tyranitar we saw outspeeding Tatsugiri previously, so that Icy Wind will be important to make sure that this Heatran and this Ninetales are not affected by flinches from these Rock Slides. Both those Pokemon just shrugging it off, and this is a lock for RAGHAV to force a game 3.
Yeah, excellent game there for RAGHAV. Doing a great job of preserving this Heatran. You mentioned how important it was going to be, and Ninetales did a lot more this game too also, right? Last game we saw RAGHAV have to commit a lot to get the Aurora Veil up and not really being worth it. This time, Ninetales staying healthy, just going on the offensive instead, and another game 3, just what we like to see.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, Scott. When we're behind the desk, we see the 3-game sets, and really a great set there from RAGHAV, controlling and saving the Ninetales for later. Michael showed that the Como was a huge problem, actually is a very big problem for RAGHAV's team. Does not have the ability to hit it crazy super effective, and what they do have available is on the physical side of things. So preserving that Ninetales to get the one-hit KO with the Moonblast, huge. This Fluttermane and Bundle lead was able to pick up the KO on Rillaboom, but the Grassy Glide did the work, and the Heat Wave picked up the rest of it.
Yeah, I just like the way RAGHAV traded Pokemon in that game a lot more. It might have seemed like both trainers were kind of recklessly letting Pokemon feint back and forth, but the Pokemon that stayed in the battlefield on RAGHAV's side of the field, well, the special attacking Pokemon, right, crucially able to deal with that Como-O at the end of the game, and then, you know, even though Tyranitar theoretically wants to be matched up with the special attackers, because both of them could hit for super effective damage, it really wasn't that positive matchup, especially because, as you mentioned in the pregame, you know, the weather war is a factor here. It was the snow that won out this time. I think in this third game, you know, if I'm Michael, trade a little bit more carefully, right? You can't give free attacks to that Heatran. It did a huge amount of damage in that game to set up that favorable end game. The other thing I want to call is I just like the finesse with how that Ninetales was played. I think one of the reasons why a lot of players have struggled a little bit to make this Ninetales work is they try way too hard to force the Aurora Veil, where it's so potentially powerful, right? It's so tempting every time you can click the button, like, yes, I need the screens, but you don't have to use it to win the game, right? If there's an easier path to the end of the game, you should always take it. And I think, you know, just going for the Moonblast there, picking up the decisive KO, and not trying to force Ninetales into the battle too early, I think it's very impressive play.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially, like you called out, the patience, especially when you're running the Light Clay Ninetales, like RAGHAV is, there is a huge pressure to be like, I need to get this up because I don't have a Focus Sash, I can be knocked out at any moment, I need to get the Aurora Veil up. So that's not always the best option, and especially preserving that Moonblast, the 4-time super effective damage on Como-O, at least this is going to make Michael think twice about bringing that Pokemon.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun too. Right? I think probably both sides are going to play this game a little bit more conservatively. We see the Arcanine and the Tyranitar once again coming out here, and then the Rillaboom and the Heatran again. So both sides opting for their winning duos.
Yep, so Sand Mode out for Michael, and the Grassy Terrain and Heatran out for RAGHAV. This is a great type matchup for the Rillaboom. Threatens super effective damage on the Tyranitar, has the fake out pressure. Heatran also is threatening huge damage on the Arcanine with Earth Power. But again, that Tyranitar with the Sand is in a good place against some of the special attacks here.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking in the previous game how important Heatran was. It's going to have a much more difficult time carrying through these Pokemon, especially if it can't land an Earth Power on the Arcanine, and Michael just not going to allow that to happen, instead getting Como out much faster in this game.
Yeah, Como out immediately, takes a fake out, and will be taking a Earth Power for its trouble, but that is a big knockoff onto Heatran. Not resisted because of the Terra, knocks off the leftovers, and Como losing some of its health will continue to be damaged by the Sand, but will be net positive thanks to both leftovers and the Grassy Terrain. Crucially, no Terra has been used yet on Michael's side.
Yeah, it seemed like it came up very quickly the previous two games. I think that knockoff is big. I think that was a critical element of why Michael won that first game. Heatran is looking to recover a little bit of HP with these with the Grassy Terrain because it hasn't terastallized away from its Sand immunity yet, but you're going to assume at some point it's going to probably want to become a Fairy-type Pokemon again, and I kind of like having these Pokemon out here early together. We're going to see Tyranitar exiting the battlefield for now, maybe trying to check any potential Aurora Veil later in this game.
Yeah, Michael also not playing as fast and loose with that Tyranitar as in the past. Switching it out, has the ability to reset weather as RAGHAV protects Heatran and gets ready to switch this Rillaboom out with the U-turn. That Como is much slower, is slower than this Rillaboom, which means that whatever is coming in here may be targeted down by that Pokemon. This unfortunately no longer makes Ninetales a safe switch in here, as we've already seen the Iron Head on Como. Ninetales switches in regardless, sets the Snow that will boost the defense, and Como is just going to go for an Iron defense here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a nice safe play. You know, it is a little scary because, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what RAGHAV has shown in the previous games. We're just looking for that first opportunity to get in and get Ninetales into battle. Because there was also the swap on the other side, though, you still can't really just recklessly Aurora Veil here. I think I would probably expect Moonblast or Icy Wind instead if I'm on Michael's side of the field.
Well, that is going to be the option that Michael has to consider. Again, having preserved the Terra, this Como is Terra Steel, so there is still, of course, the threat of a one-hit KO from that Ninetales, should Ninetales just launch a Moonblast, but Como has the ability to protect against that, although extremely scary to go Terra Steel in front of Heatran.
Yeah, Heatran's already the best Pokemon on the other side. I think making it even better in this matchup is really scary. I like this switch instead, right? I don't think there'll be an Aurora Veil coming in, but this avoids the possibility, and I think you want to whittle down this Heatran some before you kind of all in with the Como O.
Absolutely, and at least forces this Ninetales to leave and come back if it ever wants to set the Aurora Veil in this game. Actually going to be the Water Terra type from this Hisuian Arcanine, protecting against the Earth powers coming out from this Heatran.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? I mean, it's been very difficult to keep this Arcanine out in the field, which kind of is forcing Michael to expose his more important Pokemon's matchup to danger. So even though like Water type Arcanine's probably not going to sweep here, I think it helps him play this game a little bit more safely.
All right, going to be matched by the Fairy typing on the Terastallization for Heatran. RAGHAV has gone for another Icy Wind here, dropping the speed of both the Arcanine and the Tyranitar. And we have seen that Tyranitar is pretty fast, and the Flare Blitz now, without the Snow boosting Ninetales' defense, yep, that's a one-hit KO, and now there is zero threat of Snow, and also, even more crucially, zero threat of Moonblast into Como in the future.
Yeah, Arcanine able to survive that Earth Power because of the Terastallization, and I think even with the special defense trap, with the healing up from this berry and restoring health from this grassy terrain, it's going to be able to survive another Earth Power if it needs to.
Yeah, in the Sand, dealing a little bit of damage as the Grassy Terrain heals all of that right back up. Have the Tyranitar, you have the Arcanine out. We have not seen the final Pokemon, it's Landorus, that RAGHAV has brought, and we are pretty close to the same situation from game one, where this Como, if it can get in and start setting up those iron defenses, RAGHAV is going to have to rely on a couple critical hits to break through it.
Yeah, I mean, all that Michael needs to do now is going to pressure this Heatran just a little bit more. Don't necessarily need it knocked out, but just a little bit more weakened, enough so that he can kind of get Como out safely. He's getting close. Raghav's going to have to be very careful. He's one mistake away from losing this game, but this Wood Hammer is going to be a lot of help.
That's a big Wood Hammer. That is not one of the inflatable Wood Hammers that we've been seeing. That is a full sledgehammer onto the Tyranitar. Picks up that KO, takes a Will-O-Wisp for the trade. That's going to reduce the damage that Rillaboom can put out, even if it gets critical hits. But you know, honestly, with the grass typing and the grass type and bug type attacks that it has, wasn't going to be breaking through that Como anyway. Like you mentioned, Arcanine is able to survive another Earth Power even after the special defense drop and after the sand before the grassy terrain recovery.
Yeah, I mean, it's so close, but that's a big deal, right? I mean, because until the grassy terrain expires, Sand can never knock it out, and so, you know, it's not like Sand's going to get reset because Tyranitar's already been knocked out. So at some point, you got to commit at least one more attack into that slot just to get rid of it, especially because it's still like somewhat threatening. You don't want to just ignore it and allow it to start maybe throwing off some rock slides. We do see Como rejoining the battle. You know, I think Raghav's going to have to try to look for a Magma Storm in that slot, which is still resisted, but at least, you know, again, the residual damage doesn't care about Iron Defense.
Yeah, the residual damage doesn't care about Iron Defense and is actually going to be able to prevent Como from just continuing to heal up with the leftovers and the grassy terrain. Like you mentioned, Raghav is forced to target down the Arcanine with one more Wood Hammer, picks up that KO. Will take a little bit of recoil for its troubles there. But then this Como out on the field will be trying to dodge damage from this Heatran as it sets up the Iron Defense. So defense rose sharply, which means that Raghav needs to hit this Magma Storm and does not. So Como is safe for this turn from the residual damage and the special attack from the Heatran.
Now, that's a huge miss. I mean, that's the drawback of Magma Storm. It's a very powerful attack just in its base damage on top of having that trapping effect and the damage over time. But the cost of all these great attributes is the accuracy is a little bit shaky. It's kind of one of the things that you just have to accept when using a move like that, but it really matters a lot here. You know, this Como is so important. You really can't let Heatran get knocked out without doing more damage to this Como, because as we have seen, you know, when Rillaboom's out in the field, Landorus is the unrevealed Pokemon, so Como gets caught with them at full health. It's going to be really difficult. And once again, it's that Iron Bundle. The combination of these two Pokemon who closed out that first game are again out together. You know, perhaps Iron Bundle threatening a knockout on any Pokemon that could switch into the Rillaboom slot, either Rillaboom itself or into the Landorus. And Como threatening some damage the other way, could go for a super effective Iron Head or just go for another Iron Defense. It's starting to look a little weak for Raghav.
Yeah, without the Magma Storm landing, this feels just like a safe opportunity to protect the Como or go for another Iron Defense here and make it even more difficult for Raghav to be able to break that Pokemon. Iron Bundle just goes for an Icy Wind, not for the Freeze Dry that would have picked up the KO on the Rillaboom. Will instead be dropping the speed of both the Rillaboom and the Heatran, which means that Como is now faster than both Pokemon. Picks up the KO with the Body Press, and Heatran is going to launch off another Magma Storm, this time onto the Iron Bundle. It connects, which means Iron Bundle goes down. So slightly different from the end of Game 1. Raghav now has the Landorus able to come in without the Iron Bundle threatening a one-hit KO, and this Como only has one Iron Defense set up.
Oh, is that all? It'll probably enough to really negate any meaningful damage from this Landorus. You know, it's going to come in to get the Intimidate off, at least make it more difficult to use the non-body press attacks. But yeah, I mean, I don't know here. You can't Terastallize and use Terra Blast, obviously. You see the Fairy type Heatran right there. It's like, dude, just lock into Rock Slide here and hope things work out.
Well, you definitely have to get the Magma Storm up to get the residual damage. And this would be a very different situation if this Como had taken 2 or 3 turns of that Magma Storm residual damage. All of that healing, like Como hasn't been touched, so it was just healing up with leftovers, healing up with the grassy terrain until it faded. And we saw previously, Raghav did get the critical hit on the Stomping Tantrum before, was about half of the health of the Como through the defenses.
And there it is again!
It's getting there, and Michael not going on the offense, goes for an Iron Defense instead. That doesn't help when Raghav is just getting crits, but Magma Storm cannot land. Michael's Como, it's a it's traded the critical hit chance for its dancing shoes.
Yeah, I mean, sort of an even trade there. At some point you need to land that Magma Sword if you're RAGHAV. It's gonna be harder and harder for Landorus to do damage. It could just go for another crit here.
Ooh,
that would handle it, but not this time.
Yeah, no protect from Como-o, just going to take the body press into Heatran. That is still a KO. With that second Iron defense through the Fairy Terra, that means that RAGHAV needs an additional critical hit to have a chance here against the Como-o, which can still stall out with Protect to heal back up with the leftovers.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really close, too. If it gets another Protect off, even a critical hit might not finish it off. It doesn't have to Protect, though.
Another Stomping Tantrum into Como-o, not enough damage just yet. Body press into Landorus, not a one-hit KO, which means that RAGHAV gets an extra shot here.
I'll have to see if Landorus can do it. This is such a different game if you instead of that Magma Storm damage. Instead, it's all down to this. Can Landorus get the critical hit?
Another Stomping Tantrum into Como-o, no protects. Not another critical hit. Como-o survives body press. Michael Zhang is advancing to the finals here in Sacramento, California.
And a photo finish there. It could have gone either way with one roll in the other direction, but what a really great close set. Both sides kind of opting to go for their winning strategies from game 1 and game 2 there, and in the game 3, super close finish, but Michael able to pull it out.